All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kelly Dunn. I'm one of the board members for Decoding Dyslexia North Carolina. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's parent panel. Whether you're a longtime advocate or a parent who just received a diagnosis yesterday, please know that you are in the right place. We're here tonight because we know that while the journey of raising a child with dyslexia can be challenging, it's a journey that no one should have to walk alone. Our panel tonight isn't just about sharing information, it's about sharing our stories. You're going to hear from parents who have navigated the IEP process, fought for evidence-based interventions, and celebrated the incredible strengths that come along with a dyslexic mind. Our goal is to empower you with the tools and the confidence to be the best advocate for your child. Before we dive into the conversation, I just want to make sure you have some important dates on your calendar for our speaker series. First, we have Alicia Tate coming up, who is the acting director of the new Roberts Academy for Children with Dyslexia at Elon University. She'll be joining us for a free live Zoom event on Tuesday, March 17th at 6 o'clock. She'll be sharing information about the Roberts Academy and will be available to answer any questions that families might have about the program. And then towards the end of March, we're going to have another free live Zoom meeting, hopefully on Thursday, March 26th at 6:30, and that is with Erica Dunton. She is a highly accomplished director, screenwriter, and producer with a prolific career in both independent films and major television series like Ted Lasso, The Outer Banks, The Summer I Turned Pretty. She is a fabulous human being, and she will be sharing her story with us and her journey with dyslexia. And she'll also introduce us to her two daughters who also have dyslexia. That event will not be recorded, so if you want to attend and learn and ask a lot of questions, please sign up ahead of time so that you can be a part of that. We also have a few advocacy opportunities coming up as well. We'll be taking applications to join our board in June of this year, and we'll post more information closer to that date. We're also looking for inspiring young people with dyslexia to join our next youth panel event. Hopefully we'll have that, we're thinking maybe in April if we can. We have some great youth that have already joined in the past that are going to be joining us again, which is so exciting. But we would love to have anybody who wants to be part of that. We believe your voices are one of the most powerful tools for change, and we would love to have the youth share their stories with us. So if you have a child and you'd like to participate, parents can drop the emails in the chat. Or if you can also directly email us at decodingdyslexianc@gmail.com, and I'll put that in the chat. Thank you to our lovely panelists for their vulnerability and to all of you for being here. Let's get started with this conversation. I'd like to welcome our first special guest, Ms. Shannon McNamara. She joined us for our youth panel in October and has graciously volunteered her time again to be our moderator this evening. Shannon is a licensed clinical social worker and the Associate Director of Connective Parenting. She has over 20 years of experience in clinical social work and a deep commitment to helping families in our community. So I'll turn it over to Shannon.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you tonight. Yes, like she said, I am Shannon McNamara. I come from Connected Parenting. Our goal at Connected Parenting is to help parents connect with their kids in ways that strengthen families and expand community from the inside out. We love what we do and are so grateful that places like Decoding Dyslexia North Carolina invite us to come and participate in these fantastic conversations with you. So I'm thrilled to be here and introduce this wonderful group of parents. They are a remarkable crew who I think you are going to learn so much from. With that, I would love to just popcorn around and have everyone really quickly introduce themselves by name and what part of the state you're calling in from. And after that, we'll move right into the questions and conversation. Why don't we start with Noelle
Hi, Noelle Sproul, and I live in Gaston County, North Carolina.
and maybe Tia
My name is Tia Simmons, and I live in Durham, North Carolina.
and Cassie.
I'm Casey Wright, and I live in Lincolnton, North Carolina.
And am I missing anybody here that I don't see on my screen that is speaking tonight?
Me,
Oh, I'm so sorry. Go right ahead.
I'm Elizabeth Castaneda, and I'm in Lee County, North Carolina.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you so much. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I know that there are a lot of questions that parents have around what it is to identify your child with dyslexia or a learning difference. Um, I think that just to get into it, one of the biggest first questions that often comes up for folks is in the identification phase is there something actually going on with my child, or is this just a phase? Does anyone want to take that first on question?
Um, I I can. That's fine. So with Riley, like I was questioning it, like, is this a phase? Her teacher kept telling me, "Oh, she'll learn. She'll learn. One day it'll all come together." And her teacher, it was kindergarten, looped to first grade with them, and she kind of kept telling me that. And as time progressed in first grade, I was like, yeah, she's not getting it. So, like, what else can we do? Because with her, she knew all of her sight words and she could read them on a flashcard, but she had trouble putting them together with in a sentence in, the books that they read when they're younger.
So, with my son Hugh, um, so he was in preschool, and his birthday's in July, right? So he has a late birthday. He was in preschool, and the preschool teacher came to us in September or October voluntarily, and she said, "This kid is ready. I know you're thinking about it because of his late birthday. You should send him to kindergarten." So then we went to kindergarten, and it was a disaster. Within a few weeks, our child was depressed. We called him Happy Hugh when he was little. He was depressed and morose and isolated himself on the playground. All of his homework came home with smiley faces. I mean, sorry, frowny faces. We were having conversations about remediation. We were a little bit confused because we would get these frowny face, sheets at home, and we would do it verbally. And he was good, right? Like he could give us all the answers, he could do all the math. Reading wasn't progressing, but he was very young, and we had watched our older daughter, like it kind of clicked, right? And so we knew that it had, there's like a developmental issue. We were like, okay, he's just not there yet. But kindergarten continued to be worse and worse. His teacher was also a new kindergarten teacher, not very experienced. So honestly, we chalked it up to that. And we had our daughter's kindergarten teacher, who's an amazing teacher, tutor him over the summer. And she actually called me 2 or 3 weeks in and said, "There's something going on here. You need to explore." And so we were really lucky in that we had someone that we trusted who told us to look. And so we got testing really, really early. But I'm going to say trust your intuition. If you know your child better than the teacher does, if what's happening in the classroom doesn't seem consistent with what you would expect of your child, if their personality changes, explore. We didn't wait that long, but now I wish we had done it at the beginning of kindergarten instead of at the beginning of first grade. Trust your gut.
Mhm.
Yeah, Beth, how was the identification process for you guys?
I could want me to speak.
Yeah.
I think for me at first in pre-K, it was, oh my goodness, your daughter can't see. I'm like, oh, okay, that's all right. That's fine. She just needs glasses. She has astigmatism. And they gave her glasses or whatever. And they were like, yeah, no, she still can't see. And so she was able to struggle through the work. She did well. She got to the first grade, in the second grade, and her behavior began to change. So she was always in the principal office, refused to get up front in front of the class to read. So I just figured she was just shy. But then one day she was like, "Mommy, I don't know, I can't read." So that's what happened for us, and then we had to take it on to begin to navigate.
Uh-oh. We lose her. Um, Thank you so much for Tia for saying that. And I think that's a co really common first step with kids who aren't really picking up language really quickly is to think like, oh, can they see? Do we have to get their eyes checked? Do we have to get maybe they're not hearing, maybe their ears are blocked. And that can sometimes delay the process just a little bit because you're trying to find out, well, is there anything physical going on with them? And the schools really like to sort of push you that direction at first to make clear out all the other things that could happen. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Um, Elizabeth, did you have anything that you wanted to share about the identification process for your for your kiddos?
Unfortunately, my child was born extremely early, premature. So he has had issues since birth. Um, and I never picked up on the dyslexia because he also has autism, Tourette's, and several other diagnoses until just recently. And he's now 14 because he receives speech therapy. And his speech therapist didn't even inform me. I read it when I asked for their notes from speech, and so I just found out this year.
Oh, wow. That's
Um,
incredibly frustrating.
right, especially because communication is a big issue for him. He lacks communication skills, along with some other stuff. But he's a good reader, a very good reader. It's the writing portion, the taking notes. Um, so now it's all coming together. I'm like, okay, no wonder. So yeah, it's really frustrating, especially because he's not young. He's 14, and nobody from school has picked up on that. I haven't even picked up on it.
Yeah, it can be one of those hidden we talk about dyslexia in particular being a hidden disability. It's one of those things that you're like, oh, maybe it's drive, maybe they're just not motivated, when there's really something else going on underneath. Which sort of brings us to the next piece. A lot of your children were identified really pretty early, which is a new norm that's developing. That hasn't always been the case. And I'm glad to hear that. It solves a lot of um, strain on the families. But a lot of parents then come up with a question, should I get an evaluation or could the evaluation actually hurt my child within the school district, the school system, especially at those young ages? Um, what is your experience of that? Anyone who
So
wants to jump in?
yeah, so I'll start on that one. So my husband is a public school teacher. So he is in the school system. And he had very strong views about not wanting to label our child, right? And we did because I started doing the research. I could see what was going on. I had the trusted educator, that had recommended it. And so originally when we were getting him tested, uh, until we got the results back, the conversation was maybe we'll just find out for ourselves, but we won't report it at school because of the stigma. Once we got the results back, we did end up going through the school process and getting an IEP. I will say my husband's concerns, I understand better now, my husband's concerns about labeling, but I will also strongly say it was absolutely the right choice. We needed the information, and look, private testing, which is what we did, it is very expensive, and I know it's out of reach for a lot of people. You will get a lot more information, and you will be able to provide your child better support with that information. Will also, in most public schools, at least in North Carolina, probably fast track the process of getting either an IEP or a 504 in place. But I do think it was the right decision. My son needed help in school. Unfortunately, I'll have to say I don't know that most of the early interventions that happened in school, I don't know that they were very successful. We also had the means to do a lot of stuff outside of school. So he was in school, he was getting OT and some sort of ineffective pullout. I don't really know what they were doing. And he also had accommodations. At the same time, starting in first grade, we were doing OG tutoring. We were also doing some occupational therapy on our own because my child, and I think Elizabeth alluded to this also, he also has dysgraphia and ADHD. Dysgraphia is to writing, what dyslexia is to reading, for those of you who haven't heard that term yet. And so the OT was there to kind of help him with the writing skills. And then eventually we added vision therapy. But even though the school interventions in the early years were not important, the accommodations, which he still has in school, he was diagnosed in first grade, he's a senior now. The accommodations are absolutely crucial for his success. And I would say the other thing that's crucial for his success is his ability to advocate for himself, which clearly, he didn't learn that in first grade. It was something that we built over time, and we first brought him into meetings in a very small part, like in fifth grade, and then kind of a bigger part where he was actually, part of the main event in middle school. That part of it, and having the paperwork in school, I think is crucial for where he is today.
I can say, I think for Ava, I was actually worried about the current labels that she had started developing. So she went from being a very nice and kind kid to now a troublemaker. She's lazy. She doesn't listen. I was getting those labels. And I'm like, how do you change just that fast from being outgoing and kind and whatever or now you're like the worst kid in the school? And y'all was in the principal's office. And so I asked them, I was like, do you think something may be wrong? Because I wasn't sure. And they were like, no, we just think maybe she's to go to bed earlier. She doesn't want to apply herself. She doesn't do her homework. So she was just kind of written off as like a kid that was kind of a bad kid. And so I asked them, like, well, do you guys have testing just so I can kind of address that? And they're like, yeah, but it's a waiting list. And I said, okay, no problem. And so then I went, like she said, did the private testing at Etheridge and just kind of asked them, like, could you test her? And they tested her. They was like, she has a very, very significant specific learning disorder. Very severe. They said when we test, it's over a 2-week testing period. And I took it back to the school and they was like, oh, okay. What would you like us to do now? And I was like, I don't know. Because I don't know, right? And so they said, well, you have to go through all these meetings, do all these things. And so really for me, it was kind of, I hate to say liberating to find out that she wasn't this person that they had labeled her with before she got the other label, if that makes sense.
Good gosh, does that ever make a lot of sense? That I think so many kids are labeled with those kinds of things. I know my son was labeled with a lot of that too, and he went in first day of kindergarten, happiest kid he could possibly ever be, and halfway 2 months, 3 months later, he was sad, crying. The school was saying he was bad, that he just didn't want to participate. It was his fault, all those things. So you are not alone in that,
Well, and
in
we
that
had
realm.
almost a flip-flop situation. So my son would go to school and be a perfect little angel all day long, kept all his little ducks in a row, focused so hard he wore himself out. And then he would get home and we could not make it 30 feet from the car to the front door before it was an all out meltdown and he could not hold himself together any longer. And that was our evening, every evening from first grade through third grade. And I worked within the school he went to at the time. And that was a hard road to hoe. um, but, I sat in meetings for so many years saying if the child's falling apart at the end of the day, we need to figure out what we can do to help them during the day to get them to a point that they're not falling apart. And I found myself in that same position. So know that if, even if your kid seems like they're doing great within the classroom and they're that model child, but they're falling apart at home in the evening, there's a reason for that as well. That's not just happening. You're perfectly wonderful little kid who turns into the troublemaker and the perfect kid who turns into the meltdowns, they're one and the same. And both of those things are not good things. And we need to dig in and figure out what's going on for either one of those.
So I want to jump in there. For Hugh, he went from being super friendly, outgoing, social to like completely isolating himself. And so I do think that's a really early behavior signal. If your child just changes and how they are, there's a reason, and we need to explore it. And unfortunately, we're not going to always get the support that we would like to get from the school system.
Cassie, I saw that was it you that posted in that you saw the same thing from your child?
Yeah, so Riley, I actually had her tested through the school system, because I was a single parent at the time, and she was such a good child all day through school, never had any kind of bad reports about her. I mean, she still even talks to her kindergarten teacher. Um, they teach a dance class together actually. So anyway, she was a good kid, but she would come home and we would try to work on reading and homework, and she would just cry and cry and cry. And to the point I'm just like, okay, like I can't, we're done. So what I did is we made it through, I want to say it was like right around November or December of first grade. And that is when, like, I ended up having to take her to her pediatrician. And he was the one who told me, he said, write a letter to the county and to tell them that, about your struggles and what you're seeing, and that you want to formally request that she be tested. And so that's and then copy him and the school on the letter, and that's how they finally tested her. Is I took her to a pediatrician because again, like I was a single parent. I was younger when I had Riley, and I really had no clue which direction to go. I just knew in my gut that like something wasn't right, or clicking for her. So
Yeah.
I want to
And
point
we're
out
hoping,
one more flag, I think. My child could not, he was trying to hold it together so much during the school day. He didn't know who sat beside him. For years, he didn't know names of people he was in school with, because that was secondary to him surviving the academic rigors of the day. And I think that should have been a huge red flag for anybody who knew him, that this kid who like doesn't know who he sits next to. And that's wild, right? So just little things like that. Laurie posted in the chat, we said earlier, trust your intuition, but those little red flags that pop up, that some would just be like, oh, he's just not paying attention. Yeah, no, he was focusing so hard on the academics and trying to get through them that peer side of it was secondary. He couldn't handle that for years.
Yeah, and I hear this duality of like the kids who sort of, we always called it button up or zip it up, like when they go into their day and it's like they put on their suit of armor, or the kids that just sort of spin out because the world is just coming in at them too much. One thing that all of you have said, and I've seen in the chat as well, is to trust your intuition. Nobody knows your child like you do. And so if you think that there is something going on, there is something going on, whether the test shows it or not. And so I just want to empower every parent on this call to follow your instincts because nobody knows your child like you do in that way. A lot of parents find that when their children are going through this, especially we see this a lot in dads, some moms also, but they'll say like, no, 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 it's fine. They're just like I was as a kid, which sort of brings up the conversation of like, oh, were we masking more than we thought? Are we married to, or perhaps we had some challenges growing up that we didn't realize that we have realized through our children? Has that happened for anyone here? Go ahead, Noel.
My husband, I have now diagnosed, but actually, so his mom passed away, so I haven't gotten this directly from her. Um, According to his memories, and then her sister, he was tested between third and fourth grade back in the 70s. And his mom was actually, and sorry, this is what they called it then, a remedial English and math teacher. So she did know what she was looking for. So I don't, to my knowledge, my husband was not formally diagnosed. But everything that we learned about my son, when we were in the intake set or, the post evaluation sessions about my son and everything the psychologist was saying, my husband would be like, it kind of sounds like me. And so the more I've learned over time, the more I see it in my husband. And he reads, and he's right outside. He's probably getting mad at me about saying this, but he reads slowly, right? He's very thoughtful about what he reads. His proofreading, he needs a proofer, right? So all the signs are there, even though there wasn't a formal evaluation. And then again, talking to his mom's sister, there probably is a history of it deeper in her family. Again, also undiagnosed.
Yes, I can second that. My husband as well. I was definitely Ava would begin to do stuff. My husband's like, and so I remember we were married 20 years now, but I remember he always asked me to spell stuff for him. And I was like, why is he asking me that? And the reason why we would never think of this is because my husband's a postal worker. So it's like, you better know how to get those addresses, right? That's what people would think. And also he was in the military as a sergeant for a very long time. And so he had these type of jobs where this was a requirement to be able to read, recite, and know. And what we're probably thinking is he did it all off memorization all these years. And unfortunately, in our ethnic background, to tell someone you can't read or anything like that in the 70s, that was not going to go over well with your parents.
I think that's all very, very accurate, especially when you can see in hindsight. Have any of, just as a side question, have any of your spouses or other family members that you've sort of recognized as adults gone back and researched some of this a little bit more and sort of adopted or adapted with what some of your children are doing?
I think my husband does from like reading. So like now he uses certain fonts. Like he sees, oh, that is easier. Let me try that. And he also uses a lot of talk to text, things that now we can because they have the technology. So he does use a lot of different things that Ava uses to kind of help himself now as we're, getting older. It makes it a little bit easier for him.
So for my husband, no, but he's adopted AI and tech, much faster than I have. And there's so many tools that have been available to all of us for so long. Like, again, proofreading and spelling, I think, is one of his weaknesses. And so he'll either use, the tools that are there technologically, or actually he has me read it a lot. So I guess in that sense, he has, but he got successfully through school, including a graduate degree. So I think he just figured out how to cope with it when he was younger. And then his mom was there, when he was in elementary school to middle school. So I'm sure she was doing a lot of stuff that we just don't know about.
Has the recognition of the learning differences and going through the process of the reporting for your families helped with understanding any sort of previous barriers or misunderstanding that you or your families have had regarding dyslexia or other learning differences?
Okay, I'll start again. So I am probably, and I'm very ashamed to say this now, right? Um, I am probably one of the many people who all the myths that we believe about dyslexia and learning disabilities, I used to believe too. I used to, think learning difference means that you're not smart. And I cried when, my son was diagnosed, because everything that I thought I put on him, and I thought that it was his future. I was just wrong, right? And so now that's why I speak out, because I do have a much greater understanding now. And then again, my husband's in the classroom. I would say that he's learned far more from us supporting our son than he did with his teacher education. But he's also been able to bring that back to his classroom, right? And help his students more. And so I feel like, we had the resources to do a lot of stuff outside of school, but I feel like I have an obligation to not just make sure that my son gets served, but to the best I can, when his educators are willing, and we've been blessed with, many educators who are willing to kind of help them understand. So I give out a lot of resources, and I buy a lot of books that I give, to teachers, and, simple articles and everything else, because, my son had some really rough few years, and this is going to be with him, always, and he's always going to carry the badge of shame, from the hard years when he felt stupid. So I want his teachers to do better with the next child. And so I'm sorry that I used to think that, but I did.
I think for me, I learned that these differences also heighten other areas within how they think. So I didn't realize, and I think people kind of say, if you maybe you lost the movement in your left hand, but then your right arm becomes stronger. And so I noticed that there's a lot of gifts and talents hidden in these differences. And I think that's what my daughter used, right, to become who she is today, where she's like, yeah, I may not be able to do this, but let me tell you something, I can tear up a Rubik's Cube, or something like that. Things that most people who presume to be normal cannot. And so one of the things I noticed from this that I didn't know when I was younger was that there's also a uniqueness that gives them sort of superpower. There's a lot of things they can do that I cannot, or any person that does not have dyslexia cannot. And we can't even understand or fathom how they do it. But for them, it's like, boom, done.
And Tia, you had alluded to something that I think a lot of families here might sort of come up against, is that um, sort of like the family bond, the extended family being like, no, 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 you're just looking too hard. Like, you know, uh, how has that been for you? And, if anybody else wants to speak on like educating your extended family and communities in that way.
Yeah, I think the education that they're getting is, oh, wait, I'm not a freak of nature because I'm different. I think is the education a lot of people are getting, especially now that a lot of individuals in the world that people that presume to be normal are looking up to are actually the same individual like their children, right? So everyone wants to do this and do that, but the people you're looking up to actually are just like the child that your child was bullying like last week. And so I think the education is that people are beginning to understand that what they presume to be a difference to be is not actually what it is. It's just a uniqueness in that person. So some people are talented to play basketball or the violin, but other people may be talented to do other things. And I think that's the education that I've been able to share with my family, where it's not really a stigmatism. And in some cases, even though it may not feel like it at first, it kind of becomes a gift or a talent for individuals.
It gave me shivers. I got goosebumps with it. Yeah. Casey, what about you? How has this all been for you? And I think you're also not alone. I think there are a lot of parents, single parents, have tried to work through this system solo, and it's a hard system to navigate solo. How has that been for you?
So really it's just about doing the research and having the right, like kind of like the right people in your corner, because I did like get pushback with having her tested at first, but once we got her tested and we got the results back, I felt a sense of relief because then she had the support she needed, and she and I kind of like grew through it together. And I don't know, I think that it has been more like I want like a superpower for her almost because she is very good at advocating for herself, and she's good at helping other students advocate for herself, for themselves. Um, or to at least encourage them or to kind of give them tips and what has helped her and share different resources that we found that work for her.
I think that's fantastic. And I saw in the chat a couple people had talked about potentially getting bad first neuropsych reports. And I just want to go back and reiterate if something, even if it's the documentation, a lot of people will say, well, this is the expert would know. Again, nobody knows your child like you know your child. If that report doesn't feel right in your gut, you have every right to go back and question that report and go back and see if you can review that report more, review whatever happens in these conversations that you're having. I'm grateful that that was brought up in the chat because I think it's a really important thing, and people don't think that they are able to go back and push back against the professionals, and you absolutely do. You absolutely do. Yeah, go
Shannon,
on.
if you don't mind, I want to add something else to the education point. So I think it's also really, really important that we arm our kids with the language so that they can educate and be advocates. And what that looks like, obviously, is very different, based on their age. Um, a question I get asked a lot is, did you tell them, or when did you tell them, right? And my philosophy as a parent is I'm very open. Like, I'm not going to give them more information that they can handle, but I also don't want to keep things that they should know hidden. And so, I remember when we told them, which is around second grade, there's a great series of books. I'm blanking on the name right now, but it was about a boy that was really good at math, but was the last in class, right? And there's 3 or 4 books in that series. One has Mississippi because it's about spelling in the name. But we read that book to him, and then we said, "Hey, what'd you think about this book?" And he said, "That boy is me." It's not Hank Zipser. I'll find it in a second. He said that boy was me, and so we talked about how his weaknesses would show up in the classroom, but that, alongside the weaknesses, there were some strengths. And so this was 2 years in, I think, if I recall correctly. But over time, as he got older, we armed him more and more. And we did things like, telling him all the famous people that, have careers similar to what he wants to do, made sure that he knew that they were dyslexic. And we talked about Dyslexic Advantage and everything else. And so, he does get teased a lot in school. He's a boy, and so boys do that probably worse than girls. And he handles it pretty well, but he handles it well now. He also just turns it, back on him and say, well, so what? So is, Richard Branson. I'm going to be like him, not like you, right? And so you have to help them do that, and you have to help them develop the language so that when something is going wrong in the classroom, they can articulate it, because the teachers, especially as they're, getting into middle and high school, seem to be more responsive when they have a kid clearly articulating how the classroom's not working for them, as opposed to the parent. And the parent, we're not in the classroom, so we're probably not saying it as well anyway. But he actually got his best plan and his best accommodations when he was leading the meeting. But that was only possible because we had spent years giving him the language to do that.
I think that's great. Thank you for adding that in. And you've led us right into the next question here of how do I advocate for my child without becoming that parent, the parent that everybody cringes at when they walk in the building with their binder. Yes, yeah. You want to take that first, Tia?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to become that parent. I would love to avoid that. But I think if you don't, then your kid becomes that statistic or that label, that whatever they give. So it's like a balance. I am that parent. As soon as I hit the door, it's like, ugh, it's Ava's mom. And I'm like, hi. And I'm always really happy, but it's like they're like, here she comes with another question or things like that, because they wouldn't give my daughter any assistance. They said, oh, well, we understand you have these test results and we love the 20-page report, but per her grades, we don't have anywhere for her to get an IEP. We don't think she needs that right now. And I'm like, okay, what else you have? So they start with a what is the 504? They would just only give her a 504, and that didn't actually work. And so I would just keep asking, right? Because they would want to just keep saying whatever they say and write whatever they write, which is actually a record. But if you don't ask their record, right? If it's not documented, it didn't happen. So if you don't ask and make inquiries, only their record stands true, unfortunately. So it's like you kind of got to become that parent to make sure the documentation is accurate, because once it's written down, it's forever.
That's an excellent point. The documentation is forever. You need to go back and review and find out and ask more questions. Thank you so much for adding that in because it's such an important piece here. Yeah, Noelle, what did you want to say?
So I started as that parent every single time, and I'm going to say my first year advocating was definitely not successful. And still every once in a while I'm that parent, but I've gotten much better. And actually the way the the training I got to go to a Peter Wright seminar. So I'm going to geek out for a second. Peter Wright went to my law school, so yay. Peter Wright grew up in the 50s, dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, barely graduated high school, somehow got into college, barely passed college, and then somehow got into law school. And he actually argued the most important ed law case ever at the Supreme Court. I'm blanking on the name, but he got a unanimous decision at the Supreme Court where a family got reimbursement for private schooling because the public schools failed to provide an appropriate education for the child. And now Pete Wright doesn't practice very much anymore. He does advocacy workshops for parents, and he has a website that gives you tons of resources, and he has tons of books. But he'll go around and do seminars. They're also on Zoom sometimes. There was one in South Carolina when my son was in first grade. I went, and the tool that he talked about was the reframe. So you have to learn to be nice to people that you really, really don't like. You have to, write really nice notes to the awful second grade teacher that, made your child's life hell. and you always have to, when you're in a conversation with them, with your educators, and you know it's going south, and we all know when it's going south, you have to be the adult in the room and smile and reframe. And the strategy that, I would use is, okay, the conversation's getting a little contentious, but I know that we're all here and we all want what is appropriate for this child. And you have to go back and we're disagreeing about what we need to do right here, but we're all on the same page of we want what is appropriate for this child. It's really, really hard. And some educators' teams make it, almost impossible. But if you work on that, um, and every time you get tense, you kind of do that. And so I did have the big binder that Shannon talked about. It was completely an intimidation factor. But I also had my cheat sheet, and my cheat sheet told me all my magic words that I wanted to say, and the section references that I would want to reference, and special 504 IEP and testing rules under the law. So I could just look at my cheat sheet, and I had also had like magic words to help me reframe, and that helped me avoid being that parent. I would say now, looking back over the years, I think most of his teachers like me, but the teachers that don't like me probably shouldn't be in the classroom, if that's a really mean thing to say. And now, if a teacher was open to learning and listening to us and receptive to the information that we provided, we would generally get along, and I could generally be supportive of that teachers. The teachers that we have really bad memories of and that scarred my child are the teachers who could not be taught anything and weren't going to change. But we, the parents, if we want what's best for our child to happen in school, we have to be, the adults and do the reframe, because they're not, unless
So
you
I
have
do,
unless you have the good ones.
yeah, and I do want to clarify something real quick. Being that parent to me and in my mind is not being a bad person, is not being mean, is not yelling, is not screaming. What that parent was for any people that I've worked with is just asking more questions. Asking them a question that they cannot answer made you that parent. Showing up made you that parent. Following up made you that parent. So they weren't looking for you as in, oh my God, here she comes. She's going to yell at me or scream at me or beat me up. It's the fact that you were going to ask a question that they maybe didn't have training in, so they didn't know the answer. Maybe they don't have time because they have 40 kids in the class and your kid's only one of them. So really being that parent or that they want to see wasn't really a negative thing on you. It was the fact that you did your homework, you came back, you asked questions, and you didn't accept them just telling you anything, right? And so for me, I made it my second part-time job, right? So I had two jobs. I had my regular job, and then my second job was my checklist on Ava. Hey, did you get that report? Hey, how did that turn out? How was it? How was everything this week? So really, I'm just saying that the person to follow up, the person to follow through, because I get it. A lot of the educators, they're busy, they're overwhelmed, and you become that parent whenever you pull someone out of their comfort zone and they can't respond to you or work with you in the way that they feel comfortable.
I think it's an excellent point, and I think that the key pieces that you brought up there is the collaboration versus the contention there. And I think teachers do sort of like brace, like, because they're the front lines, even though they might not have anything to do with how the interventions are put forth in the resource room or chapter one. But they're ready for it. And if you come in with that curiosity and like, how can we work together? It goes a long way. You're still that parent because you're following up. Yeah. Casey, how have things been for Riley in that way?
So, I can only remember a handful of times where I've had to be that parent. Riley, even from a young age, has always been able to clearly articulate where she is struggling and what she thinks might work for her. I don't, um, so yeah, the times that I can remember, it always had to do with like testing. So in third grade, it was also COVID in 2020. Her teacher kept telling the entire class, like, oh, if you fail the EOG, you're gonna fail third grade. And she was like, I'm gonna fail the third grade. And I was like, you're not gonna fail the third grade. And so then that started to create testing anxiety that I think that she struggled with all through the rest of elementary and middle school. And even sometimes now she struggles with it, but I think it's a little less now. Um, but when I have had to step in, she's always been able to tell me like, um, this is what's happening, this is where I'm struggling, and I feel like this teacher or situation is not working for me. Um, and I just help her kind of navigate that.
Yeah. Something that Noelle brought up specifically, but all of you have spoken about is sort of the connection that you have with your child in these conversations with the schools and the IEP process. And I think that that's such a valuable insight to have, that these conversations aren't too big for these children. Bringing them into these meetings, even at a young age, is can be helpful in helping them understand what's happening with them, that they have a voice, that there are words and there's language around what's going on for them. I know that a lot of administrators sometimes don't love it when we bring in our kids, but it's really part of the learning process and it is about them. So when you can pull them into a conversation and give them some agency in, would you like to have your resource room time before lunch or after lunch? Little things like that empowers them to move forward. And for everybody here who's on the call, I've had the ultimate privilege of meeting these three children at um, the last panel, the last students panel, and they are really incredible, incredible kids. You guys have all done a really remarkable job pulling them in and allowing them to build those advocacy muscles that are going to really help them throughout their lives. I think
Well, and
that's really great.
it's part of the transition for the next stage, right? Like, you know, what I did in elementary versus middle school versus high school is very different. And then next year he's going to be at college, and then other than helping him navigate with the disability office to get his accommodations in for college, it's up to him. But honestly, in high school, I sent out an email at the beginning of each semester so that his teacher knows there's a 504, and kind of saying like he likes school, he's smart, he just has this stuff going on. Um, and he might come talk to you. Other than that, I think he asked me to step in one time his freshman year with a teacher who, was just not getting it. But beyond that, he's done it. And I think there was another time his sophomore year when he was telling me about it. And so I emailed the teacher without his permission, and he blew up on me, as he should have, right? Because he had not asked me for help. He just told me about it. But I do think I don't know what's going to happen next year, right? And of course, I'm a little bit worried about it, but I do believe that the way we navigated this and how we transitioned over the past several years has set him up that he is going to be empowered to go and talk to his professors, et cetera. And, when we've been at college visits and in sessions, when these questions come up, kind of in the audience, that is what, the deans and whatever tell the parents every time is your child has to speak up. They have to be open about telling it. So if you're doing these things now and training them to do it and helping them find their voice, it's going to make the next stage so much easier.
The 4 years of high school are not enough time to teach them what they need to know. So I learned that as a provider when I was working in a high school setting. And it was like, oh wow, we can't learn all this in 4 years' time. And I mean, it just was blaringly obvious. And so the earlier you can start, the better. And on a personal note, when my son was receiving only speech therapy services early on in kinder and first, he sat in on his meetings. So if it's meetings that you know are not going to be contentious at an early age, let them sit in. I encourage parents that I work with to, I'm fine with your child attending the meeting if you're okay with them attending the meeting. With I think for me, with every kid I work with, whatever it is, whatever their neurodiversity is, we talk about addressing the monster in the room, and it empowers them once it's been called out, right? It takes that weight off once it's out there. And I think the earlier they learn that, it makes talking about it much more comfortable. And the more they do it, it's like building a muscle, right? The more they do it, the easier it becomes. And similar story, freshman year, there was one teacher who was just like she retired the next semester. So there's that. But that's really like the only one I've gotten involved with. There's been occasional, like, he's voiced, I asked for this, it didn't happen. I asked for it again, it didn't happen. I was like, and I say, do you want me to email? Will you? I send the email, hey, I've heard he's asked for it a couple of times. What's up? And then it usually gets taken care of. So I think when it's something, when it can be handled that easily, great. But at the high school level, he's dealing with it. And that's been something this year I've had to step back on. Like, he's going to college. So we got to turn over the reins. They've got to learn how to deal with it. So the whole I do, we do, you do mentality, by the time they get to high school, we should really be for the most part, turning over the reins to them for them to do it, with minimal support from us. But it takes a lot of practice.
Yeah. And I think that's a great segue into our next question of what helped your students the most along the way? And really, in the long run, what helped your family navigate the system the most? You can answer it either way.
Okay. Okay.
I know I'm with you, Noel. I'm like, I don't want to. I'm like, I don't. I'm like, I'm trying to hold it. So I'm
See,
like,
I was
I'm with you.
holding
I
Start
know.
naming
Yeah, I
names.
know.
it too. So what helped him the most? So kindergarten, first and second grade were nightmarish. His reading was actually getting a lot better because of tutoring, but his teachers those 3 years just saw him as a problem and a behavior issue, lazy, and his confidence was shot. And then third grade, he switched schools for the second time, and we hit the jackpot. Um, his third grade teacher was the first teacher who began to see his strengths, even though he was still like a hot mess and still a lot of work for her. But she saw his strengths and she was patient with him. And she's an amazing woman. And it turns out that later on her child was diagnosed. So, great kind of full circle moment of she learned a lot from Hugh that she was able to use for her child. But she also had the suggestion because he made a lot of progress in that third grade year, and his confidence started coming back because he knew that she saw him as smart again, when for the longest time he thought everybody saw him as stupid. She suggested that when he moved to fourth grade, that before school even started, we have a transition meeting with his fourth grade teacher. And that was also another jackpot. But because she transitioned or kind of transferred all of her knowledge as a teacher about my child to the fourth grade teacher, who was completely receptive to learning it, the fourth grade teacher was able to pick up where she had left him, and she really helped him soar. And so the combination of those two women gave him his confidence back. And then, fifth grade, I absolutely cried at awards ceremony. In two classes, he got most improved student and best student. So you kind of like see the trajectory that happened over those years. But it would not have happened without those two wonderful teachers who gave my baby his confidence back.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I was like, no, no. So I think the biggest thing for Ava for me was what I was noticing is that I was doing a lot of her defense. I was like her defense attorney at school for a very long time. Like when she first started, I was always the one kind of going there and talking. And I was thinking to myself, like, how long are you going to be able to do this for? Because when she gets older, you're not going to be able to do this, right? And so my biggest thing was, what am I going to do to build up her confidence and belief in herself enough to go on this journey with me and to believe in herself that she can do the journey? And so for Ava, it was more so like role playing and constant affirmation to remind her that you are unique. Actually, you have a gift. And I know it's kind of like, why would you tell your kid that? It's like because she was still at that impressionable age where she believed when I said that. And she believed it so heartily that it built her confidence. And she really became the gift that I told her that she was. And so that's the one good thing about identifying it early. You still are very impressionable to your children. So you can kind of help shape their confidence model a little bit to kind of help them move forward. So that was very helpful for me because if she was with me, then I wasn't like fighting on my own. It was like me and her teaming up and thinking about what works best for her. She's a part of the IEP. So she was like in it, like in the meetings, trying to get them to give it to us and, telling her story of what doesn't work for her and what does to make sure when they do make accommodations, it's helpful to her. Because I found that when I was doing it on my own, I would get home and tell her, and she was like, I don't like that. I don't I don't want to leave my class for 30 minutes. I'm like, oh, sorry, I'll go back. So, I had to start including her very early. If I was going to really make her part of it and build her confidence, she had to feel like she was part of it. And the second thing for me and my family was the acceptance. The acceptance that we were about to go on a journey all together. So let's go ahead and start rearranging our schedules now because this is something we're not going to be doing on lunch breaks, right? And I think that's a big part of it too, because if you're a single parent or you're a parent that works a lot and have several jobs, the last thing you're thinking about is going to a school to talk about your children every week or every other day or having these big IEP meetings with 7 people and you don't know what they're talking about. This is really not part of your schedule and maybe you can't take off work. So my whole thing was like reorganizing my schedule to make sure I had places or pockets there that I can spend time to really address the issue at hand because I knew it would be a journey.
I love it. Casey, do you have anything to add there?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
What helped the most along the way for either Riley or yourself in the system?
Um, I mean, really, I would say, what do you think? Riley is right here. You can say, hey. So what do you want to say?
I think that like growing up with this and having like we keep saying you need to teach your child to advocate for themselves and you need to advocate for your child. I think that's very important because I took those skills from my mom and I was able to learn the way I learn and being able to do that has helped me be successful and like I do a lot of stuff I never thought I would be able to do when I was younger because I have a learning disability. So you just need to try your best to teach your kids how they learn because at the end of the day, they're the ones that have to live with it. So if they know how they learn, then they're gonna still struggle, but not as much because you know how what the problem is, what needs to happen to fix the problem, etc.
See, she's so good at at that. Like she can say it better than I can. But yeah. So she's always, like I said before, been able to clearly articulate where she struggles and what she needs. And she's always been able to tell me like when she needs me to step in to help her. And like this year she has an honors class that they just sit in the class and they just read the entire class period. Well, that's a struggle for her. And so we found some resources for that. So that's another thing is just knowing where to even find the resources that your student might need as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, you can't Riley is amazing,
Yeah.
has an amazing ability to just speak very clearly and eloquently. I'm so glad that she's there with you. And I'm also noticing Noelle's note on the side here about reiterating what Tia had said about identity and having something outside of school. And I remember
Mhm.
that being a really core message that the student panel had last time as well, that really helped along the way is having those outside of school areas of agency and greatness that they could fall back on.
So in his first evaluation, um, the thing that the psychologist said that stuck with me is that school was going to be really, really hard and he was going to struggle. Um, but so school would test his weakness and life would test his strength. And our job as parents was to somehow, through the years of school, maintain his confidence. And, we got that at 6. So we were really, really lucky. I'm going to say, for parents of younger kids out there, when first, second, third, fourth, we tutored to 6th grade, when we were doing tutoring and OT and everything else, it really sucked that we also had to have time for his fun things. I think it was soccer and taekwondo then, because we did not have the time or the money, right? But it was necessary, and I'm glad that we kind of followed that advice. And over time, he found his own things eventually, right? But that was really, really important. And so he actually is, knock on wood, number one in his class. So and he has been all of high school, but he doesn't have confidence in anything about school. He has, kind of a complex because how the bad feelings he had from elementary school follow him. But he found confidence through sports, and that's been really, really important for him.
So I just want to say with Riley, so she's danced since first grade. And so that was always her outlet. And then this year, when she got into high school, she took Foods 1 the first semester, and she's in Foods 2 now. And it is unbelievable the things that she's learned, and she's always super excited to talk about it, to tell me what she learned. She has made some fabulous desserts over the holidays, and so I definitely think having that has also helped her too. She wants to say something again.
Also, like when your kids are going into high school, people, especially teachers, are going to be like, okay, maybe you should take this class and this class. I think that we should also have at least like one fun class that we look forward to going to because, like, that's like a place you can reset through the day because well, right now I have PE, but you're not going to have PE unless you request for PE. Like you're not going to have that all 4 years of high school. So you don't really have a period that you can like reset. Like if you're having a bad day, reset and continue on with your day. It's like I like having a class that I look forward going to reset my day. Yeah, that's it.
Following up on that, being able to say, speak up for themselves to say, I don't want to take that class, or I don't think
Mhm.
I'll enjoy that class. Mine ended
And
up in a college level psychology course last semester. And he told the counselor, that's not me. I can't, especially virtually, like, I can't do that. And she was like, yeah, you can, you can. I'm sure you can. And he got, I think, 2 or 3 days into it. It was like, ma'am, no, I need out of this class. I can't, because psychology, at college level psychology is a lot of reading. And especially to not have a professor standing in front of you teaching, it was all reading. So he got out of that and got into something he enjoyed a little bit more. But to be able to stand up and say, I don't think I want to do that, that's not going to be like, I'm going to struggle through that. And I don't want to struggle through that is really important.
Well, and I
And
think,
going
go right ahead.
and going into high school, like, um, especially peers, because a lot of my friends are in AP classes. So like I think that we should like you guys should let your kids know that like if you don't want to take that honors or AP class, like that is just fine. That doesn't mean you're any less smart than the next person. You just learn
Yep.
differently. And yes, it is good to push yourself, but you don't want to push yourself to an extent where you literally like you don't want to go to school, you don't want to do that class, you're freaking out over the class. Like I don't think you should have to do that. Yes, it's good to push yourself, but it is okay not to take in that AP class or anything because I know my counselors, at least they do talk about AP classes a lot and like taking college classes at Gaston and stuff. And if you don't want to do that, like that's okay. It doesn't mean you're any less of a student.
You're right, Riley. There can be a
Right.
lot of, and Noelle may speak to this too, a lot of stigma around not taking those classes. But you know what? Kids get into colleges taking regular classes. They get offered scholarships, taking regular classes, maybe a few honors classes here and there. And so it's okay to do that. It's okay to be mediocre, if you will, and enjoy your high school years.
And as we're talking about the kids' zones of greatness here, I wanted to ask, has a teacher ever done something that's made a really big difference to you and your family, and really highlighted your child's zones of greatness?
Yes, I would like to actually say, it was Riley's sixth grade teacher. She's on this call, Dr. Dimes. She really has inspired Riley, to just, I don't know, I mean, Riley has all these like goals and what she wants to do and like advocate for students with dyslexia. And she'd always talked about going to college, but when she met Dr. Dimes, she really was like, oh yeah, I can do this. I can go to college. Um, so yeah.
Fantastic. Tia Noel.
Tia, you go.
Okay. 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 There are actually a lot of teachers that after Ava was diagnosed and they begin to see the shift and they're like, oh my gosh, Ava, you're really actually really good at this. Things like that. They would start to really see like I was happy for them to have that self-reflective moment. Like maybe I jumped the gun too soon on this one. Maybe I should have really, self-evaluated. And to me, that's great because now the next kid after Ava could be an example, right, for that teacher to see maybe there's something else there they can help with. So it's been just so many teachers after that point that have kind of said, you know what, you're really good at this. Can you do this? Or can you help me with this? And can you share and speak to the other children about this? Because they would probably hear it better from you. And so now what that did for Ava is that the first thing she does when she does a speaking engagement at a school is she wants to go to the EC class, right? To say, I'll go there first, then I would do the presentation for the rest of the school. So it's like things like that, that kind of help.
That's really cool. So we've also been blessed with more of the good teachers than, the challenging teachers. I already told you about the third and fourth grade, and those women are amazing. He's had some teachers in high school, I think, that have stretched him and helped him realize he can do more. He's had teachers in high school that have really helped him hone in and engage some of his interests. So that's been great. But I actually want to talk about, and this, he doesn't see this, this is as a parent, what I thought was great. The testing coordinator at his high school has been amazing. And parents, when you get to high school, that testing coordinator is important for standardized test, AP test, SATs, ACTs, kind of what you need there. And so if you have a good one, it's pretty awesome. She, well, first of all, she would always call me and say, "Hey, here's the options. Here's what you need to know." And we would go over it. But because she wanted and she knew that I wanted him involved in the process, she would, after she talked to me about it, then she would go clear it with him. And, because a lot of times I'd be like, well, I have to talk to him. I don't know, exactly which way he's going to go there. And so she also developed a relationship with him and helped him again figure out how to advocate, and that outside the classroom, but very important, testing setting for all the really important tests we're taking. And, there was one time, I forget what test it was. I think it was a North Carolina English 10 test. And there was an accommodation that the state wouldn't give us. But it turned out that because he had accommodations and he wanted on paper testing, he didn't get, the accommodations. And then we found out later, oh, they had switched it so everybody was typing. So he would have actually been better off. So she was also really good about, if something went wrong, she would talk to us and communicate to us. And, she, really helped us navigate everything. And so Hugh doesn't appreciate that as much as I do. But I know how much it benefited him. So I encourage you to get to know those people in your school system also. Similarly, the counselors. The counselors are also really, really important, and a good counselor is very valuable.
But it sounds like the thing that all of your children had in common was that one or two or more people that really just sort of saw the potential and took them in and said, "Hey, you've got this. You can do this. We're not going to downplay anything for you. We're just going to support you through it." I think that's amazing. Teachers are just really amazing people. Counselors, I agree, are amazing people, and a lot of nurses really will go to bat for for the kids in their schools. So I want to thank you all. I think it's now a good time. I'm mindful of the time. I want to get to some of the Q&A questions. We've got some really great ones in there. Cassandra, were you minding that, or Lori, was that you?
There is a question that I said we would get back to.
There's one from Mary Beth at 719. And it says, to the parents, how do you help support your kid in talking to their friends/teachers about their dyslexia? That's one. Transitioning from you advocating to them advocating, which I know we talked about a little bit, but if you wanted to elaborate. Yeah, some stuff there. There was another question at Cassandra.
So I think it's really important that, so another technique that we use to kind of help train them, give him the words to do it. So, and he really started doing it really aggressively for himself starting in 8th grade. And then he was doing it all for himself by 10th grade. But I would tell his teachers, kind of my intro email every semester, he may come to you. And my freshman email probably said he might not have the words, his attitude may be bad because, if he's coming to you, he might be frustrated. And so be prepared for that. And, we would, as much as possible, we would talk it out at home. If he thought it was going to be contentious, I might send an email to the teacher saying, hey, he's going to come talk to you, right? But you have to develop a relationship with the teachers so that they are receptive when your child comes to them. Because when they're learning how to do this and when they're younger, I mean, think about how they talk to you sometimes, right? Like their attitudes and their tones and their annoyance or anger or whatever comes off. It's sometimes just bad. But when you're asking for something and you're going to be an advocate, when you come across with a bad tone or the wrong attitude, you're not going to get the right reception. So I would kind of field it from the back and email, hey, he's going to come to you. I suspect he might not have the right attitude, but listen to him anyway. And so once we did that a few times and he got comfortable asking and he got better at the attitude part of it, it got better over time. And look, that attitude conversation, he's a great kid. I still have it with him all the time, right? um,
That's great advice. Thank you.
Else want to jump into that one?
I'll say for the advocating for themselves is I agree with what Noelle said about pushing the teachers back to them, like letting them go back and talk to them directly. I think a lot of times I would get maybe an email or something. I'm like, "Do you talk to Ava about it?" They're like, "No." I'm like, "Yeah, no. I need you to tell her what it was and let me know what she says." Right? Because if you don't address them directly, you go around them, they'll stop talking to the teachers. So I think just having that partnership and encouraging the teachers, like you said, build a relationship early on and encouraging, just ask, just ask her. I've been building her up for this. She should be able to speak on her own. Let me know if you don't get anywhere, but I think you may be able to talk to her directly. So I think for the advocating is like kind of helping the teachers feel okay doing that and then letting the kids know, like she said, that they can do that. So I think that's for the advocating. And for sharing the friends, I would tell Ava to read the room. Some of her friends are undiagnosed, so she doesn't have to tell them anything. They can tell they're the same because they can recognize their tribe. And then other children that may be a little bit different. A lot of times people will ask Ava, like, how did you do all this stuff that you're doing? And she's like, well, actually, I have a superpower. I'm dyslexic. So it kind of turns more into like, something. And they're like, really, what is that? And then they begin to talk about it or whatever, because that's how they talk in like their kid talk. So I think it's just like reading the room, knowing your audience, and then sharing when you feel comfortable.
Thank you. And you're right. They do find their tribe somehow. Like, it is amazing how the kids find each other. So I appreciate your feedback to everybody. Thank you.
I shared a link in the chat for a neurodiversity affirming notebook. It's geared towards high schoolers, but I personally use it with children that I work with in elementary school. I just adapt it a little bit. It's a conversation starting tool, really, especially for the younger kids. But there's a lot of things in there that you can do along with them side by side. That is just a matter of, it's a really good tool for accepting your differences as your unique greatness, right? We're all different and we all bring something different to the table. And it doesn't mean that we're broken. It means that we're unique. So it's a book that's put together by a speech pathologist who has worked with neurodiverse high schoolers for years and years. And it really is great. I really, really like it, and I use it quite often in sessions. There was another. Did we answer all those questions?
I think there was a question about dyscalculia, which I don't have anything to add to that, but I wanted to make sure it got answered.
Yes, Kaylee asked, did anyone else take on dyscalculia? What resources would you recommend? Are any of the parents? No.
I have,
Casey, no.
my son has dyscalculia. That is probably his most difficult area at this time. He's had so much remediation in reading and writing, and math is kind of like the last frontier for him. So I could not find any math tutors or people that really specialized in it in my area, or even online. I was having a hard time finding people. And so I looked up the experts that I could find, and I found a man named Steve Chin, who is a genius. And he has made an enormous amount of resources for kids who struggle in math. And also Marilyn Zescher, who holds courses where she trains teachers, and parents can take courses with her too to learn about how to start with the basics of math, like a multisensory math, I think is her course. And she's absolutely fabulous. I actually messaged those two directly, and they messaged me back, which was blew my mind. I was like, holy cow, I can't believe these people are messaging me back. It's amazing. But they had long chats with me and told me where to start and what to start doing with them now, and then gave me resources to move ahead. So definitely don't be afraid to message the experts. My gosh, it blows my mind every day that they got back to me. Also, there's a math program through Linda Mood Bell. I can't remember the name of it offhand, but she has a fabulous math program. Um, there's also a resource for a group out of Florida that does online tutoring uh, through the Now program, that they also have a piece of that program that deals specifically with math. And my son has participated in that, and that was fabulous for him. But yeah, just ask the experts. A lot of the reading tutors could sometimes refer to math tutors in our area. They knew of people, but they're just in particular in our area, there wasn't a lot. So we had to turn to a lot of online resources for that. But we found some great people and we're still working on it every day. But definitely touch base, check out that Linda Moo Bell. Definitely check out Steve Chin and Marilyn Zescher, because those are all great resources for math.
And I
Kaylee,
put
I
a
would,
link
oh, sorry, go ahead,
in the
Cassandra.
chat for Key Learning Center, which is out of Asheville. They offer a lot of conferences and seminars. I know they have some multisensory math seminars coming up this spring. And it will tell you on their information whether or not it's geared towards simply educators or educators and parents. A lot of what they put out is also geared towards parents. They encourage parents to come, very welcoming to parents. I was just at a conference recently and it was educators, parents, tutors, everyone coming together to learn more about best practices. So I do know they have some multisensory math stuff coming up.
Kaylee, I'd add into that. My daughter also has struggles significantly with dyscalculia, and the Lindenwood Bell program has not been as well reviewed as their reading program. So I would just be a little cautious because Lindenwood Bell can be quite expensive. But I would echo. What Kelly was saying about the multisensory math. And right now, I think that in terms of curriculums, the gold standard, sort of like OG is the gold standard for the literacy. The gold standard for math is illustrative math. One of the challenges with that is that the training for that is quite intensive, and so schools are sort of cutting corners a little bit. So if you're going to go that direction, it can be hugely helpful for dyscalculia for kids because it takes it in sort of a chunking sort of way and only allows them to move to the next conceptual level once they've met the first level as they go up. But if the training facility or the school district has rushed the training to try and get it up to speed for like this school year, then they might have missed some of those steps trying to keep up with like Common Core. So you just want to make sure that whoever you're seeing is very well trained. But the multisensory math programs in that way are the way to go for kids who have a difficult time with that symbol indexing of mathematics. So I appreciate that question. I think a lot of people do leave dyscalculia out, and it belongs in this category of LD dyslexia. It is the math dyslexia, so it's really very much worth talking about.
There's another question that came in about did anyone do multiple reading programs? The child just finished the Wilson program after 2.5 years, but she still feels like there's room to grow.
I have thoughts on this, but I'll leave it to
I do as
the
well.
parents first. Yeah, Casey or Noel, you want to jump in?
Did you all do?
Sandra, why don't you kick us off on this one?
Say that again. Did you want me?
Do you want to start on this one?
So there's a lot more. I would. Okay, I have a question to start with. Did your child finish the Wilson program through a public school or through a
No,
private tutor?
private tutor.
Okay. So I think the Wilson program, there's so many different programs out there. The Wilson program is a branch off of a larger, not even a curriculum, but a standard of learning. And so what you get oftentimes when you have these programs like Wilson or Barton, that come off of like the granddaddy is that you're getting bits and pieces. And while some of those bits and pieces are foundationally are really good, they may not be as in depth or as structured as what the overarching program intended them to be. And you may not be getting as much detailed and structured instruction as you could be. Does that make sense? Go ahead, Shannon. You follow up
It
on that.
it does. Do you guys have a recommendation on another program? Sorry for butting in there. I have all the questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Sandra, I'll kick it back to you in just a second, but I have noticed that different programs do work differently with different kinds of dyslexia. So if your child has really good comprehension but struggles with word attack and decoding, they might work really, really well with Orton Gillingham. If your child is a slower processor or has difficulty with some of the sound symbol pieces of it, they might work better with a Lindemood Bell program. So I think Art and Gillingham is the one that most of the schools have picked up along with Wilson. Those seem to be the two most popular because I think Orton Gillingham works really well in a classroom, like a larger setting model, similar to Wilson. Um, most of the kids that I have worked with, they tend to be on the more dyslexic side and have some combination of other things. The Lindemood Bell has been by far a much more beneficial and long-term it's helped more long-term than the others. But Lindemood Bell is quite expensive, which I think is why it's not adopted more. It's also very, very intensive. The other thing I find that's a difference between Lindemood Bell and Norton Gillingham is that the way Lindemood Bell is done seems to be more it seems to build the child a little bit more. They feel a little bit more, they have this way of like putting gems in a bucket, and the child doesn't really know why they're getting the gems. They just know that they're winning at whatever they're doing. Whereas Orton Gillingham, the way it's done very similarly in that way with the repetition. But for some kids, it can feel almost a little bit more like a punishment because when they don't get it right, the card goes back to the back of the pile and they keep doing it until they get it correctly. So there's a, you know, there is no rhyme or reason to the gems that they do in Linda Mood Bell or whatever their reward structure is. It just is what it is. But it's the motivation of it really works for kids, and they end up leaving feeling a little bit better about themselves, which I think in turn makes them a little bit more motivated and excited about going. So those are my insights on it. Cassandra, I'm not a reading
I also
specialist.
think that regardless of I'm actually trained in Lindemood Bell many, many, many moons ago, and also trained in Orton Gillingham. But I think that it also whatever you're going into, because I think all of them address all the aspects that need to be addressed. But I think getting a really, really good diagnostic assessment of what's really going on. The person that's working with your child, like it's a deep dive to figure out what really needs to be targeted. And it might be several different areas, but really just knowing what needs to be addressed, not wasting time on things they already have. For me personally, my kid was a really good reader. He had gained those skills, but he was a terrible speller. He was a terrible writer. He had a horrible time sharing what he comprehended with sentence structure verbally, even though his language skills were off the chart. It was an odd duck, right? No, that's why it took us so long to or it took the school system so long to figure out what was going on with him. Because it didn't look like a duck and quack like a duck. But I think having someone who really digs in and figures out exactly what needs to be worked on. So, you're not deep diving into phonics when phonics isn't an issue, and you're not burning the kid out that way. I think that's key as well. But you don't want to work on things that they don't need to work on because you don't want to burn them out in an area they don't need to be focusing on. You want to be putting your energy into what needs to be worked on. So regardless of whether it's Lindamood Bell, Orton Gillingham, Wilson, whatever it is, you need to be able to adapt it to fit the needs of the child you're working with.
I think that's a spot on advice right there. The only thing that I might add and that we didn't talk about today in terms of programs is that a writing program, I think, along with a language reading program is really helpful. And the Hockman method has been the one that has seemed to be most effective for a lot of LD kids, dyslexic kids, because it is so structured and segmented in how you write a paragraph and how you form different structures for your writing. So that I think the sort of out there version of that would be the writing revolution, but that's all based on the Hockman method there. So are there any other questions before we sign? I know we're running a little late, and I really appreciate everyone who has been here with us so long. Anything else? Yeah, I see that Noel said that they did a writing program and he hated it. It helped him write better, though. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I am going to really quickly put my information into the chat here if anybody would like to reach out for anything else. I'm also going to add an assistive tech professional that if anybody is looking for more information on especially going into college for assistive tech. There's a gentleman named Brian Friedlander. There are others in the state of North Carolina that I know you can find, but getting a good assistive tech evaluation can be the difference between success in high school and college or not. Most places don't recommend them before high school. For some LD kids, I think that it's helpful early on, but I'm going to put it there just because it's a resource that I've recently come across that has been invaluable to us. In addition, I have shared some other handouts and things that might be helpful to families with decoding dyslexia to add to their repertoire, including an old Is My Child Ready for College resource from Landmark College. That is something that they offer online now. I have the older paper version, and it's really helpful for people. So I want to kick it back to the Decoding Dyslexia crew, and I want to thank all of our parent panelists, Noelle, Casey, and Tia, for joining us tonight. Is there anything I've missed, ladies? Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for staying on with us so late this evening. We really appreciate you. I see in the Facebook Decoding Dyslexia North Carolina is on Facebook and has the other handles. And I hope to see you at some of their other events soon. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for
Thank
coming. Thanks for
you.
Thank you so
participating.
much.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
for
having
being
us.
here. Yep.
Yes. Have a great week and a great night.
Thank you.
You all too.
Thank
All
you all so
right.
much. That was
Thank you,
really
Shannon.
wonderful.
You're
I'm
amazing.
sorry we got a little bit off track with some of the questions and went a little bit longer than I know you had planned. So I appreciate
No.
Do you
all of
want to
you.
stop recording?
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
hold on.
I thought you did great. And it's okay to let the conversation kind of